Hey guys, we're gonna wait for a couple more minutes till Matt comes on and we'll get started. Hmm. We're gonna wait another minute here and we'll get started. Matt's gonna join us.
Hey Judd, hey
Hey
y'all.
Matt, there he is, right on time. Yeah, so everyone, thanks for joining us. Today we're gonna talk about tax essentials for Check Cherry users specifically. Matt's got some slides. He'll be doing most of the talking. And if you have questions, feel free to, chime in the chat during the presentation. Um, I guess, in prepping for this, we kind of were a little concerned about time. So we'll see kind of what gets in here and what doesn't. But the idea is that we'll just kind of cover tax as a kind of a bigger issue for check cherry users, and go from there. So Matt, I suppose if you want to take it away with your slides, that'd be awesome. Again, I'll be monitoring the chat, so if you have questions, feel free to chime in there, and I'll go from there. So.
Okay.
Tax is such a fun subject. I can't wait.
Right? This is why we do business, right? To be able to do taxes at the end of the year. It's the fun part. So yeah, as Judd mentioned, we're going to be covering tax essentials for Cheshire users. And what we're going to be covering, just kind of a brief overview, is I guess first off, this is going to be US centric. So a lot of the principles will hold for other countries, but we're going to kind of use the US, uh, what a US customer typically has to deal with is the primary focus here. And we're going to cover both sales tax and income tax. So we'll start kind of going through some of the sales tax features and requirements, and then move on to income tax. And we'll cover what forms to expect, so all your 1099s and things like that. And then probably most importantly is where to find the information in Check Cherry. So what kind of reports do we have available? Where can you find stuff? Uh, some tips and tricks around getting the information you need. And so and we'll have a few other considerations. Definitely one thing to keep in mind, every business is different. Probably everything I say, there's probably an exception and a caveat and, asterisks and everything else. So, definitely, keep that in mind. And the tax details are going to vary based on where you're located, where you do business, what type of business you have, what type of accounting you're doing, and things like that. So ultimately, everything we say is just kind of our experience dealing with Check Cherry, dealing with the questions people ask us. But we
Yeah.
definitely
And
recommend, yeah,
get a good accountant slash finance professional that you trust is what I would say. And this webinar is just informational purposes to help you understand kind of the bigger picture of tax and also how Check Cherry helps you accomplish and meet your tax obligations.
And so So I guess the first thing is, does Check Cherry do my taxes for me? And unfortunately, the answer is no. We try to provide tools and reports and the information you need, and tools to track things like what the sales tax is for your different locations, different events, things like that. But we're not able to do the taxes for you. You'll have to, you have to do that on your end. And that goes for both collecting and remitting sales tax and any income tax considerations you have. And so to start with, let's dive right into sales tax. So sales tax obviously is, on your invoice. That's the little extra line item that's going to show, the extra 7.75% or 10% or whatever the local rates are where you're located at. That's typically going to be something that's added to the invoice, to the subtotal, and then at least in the US, and then the total will be added on to that. And The first question you kind of need to consider is like, do you even need to collect sales tax? And unfortunately, that's not an easy answer. Not all states require sales tax on services. So it really does depend on the specific state you're located in. And it depends on what states you do business in. So if you go across state lines, there might be different tax requirements in each state. Unfortunately, there are tools online. You can search Google for your state and things like that, but there's a lot of variation across different locations. So
And also, we have customers that some services they consider taxable and others they do not. Some states have concepts like personal tangible property triggering sales tax. I've seen photo boothers say that if they print and hand something to people, that they're exchanging personal tangible property, whereas if it's just digital only, somehow that is not taxable. So again, you're gonna have to ask somebody you trust, find a good professional in your state to get that answer. But it really varies basically
yeah.
by service
Yeah,
and
and
by
even in, say to take California as an example, services are not generally taxable here. So, generally if you're DJing a wedding or something like that, you would not pay taxes, but a lot of people, have the understanding that if you give somebody a printout, then it becomes a
yeah.
tangible good. And so sometimes people will have certain services that are taxable, certain add-ons that are, and they're not too.
And
So
Check Cherry's job is to basically give you the tools to make it as easy as possible to comply with, your requirements and kind of what your accountant recommends you do.
And you can definitely also reach out to local sales tax, to
Franchise
whatever.
tax board,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, they'll have information as well. Unfortunately, a lot of times it's just not clear cut. They'll have information on, say, photographers, photo boother, and so it's kind of it's always tricky figuring that stuff out. So,
Hmm.
and then of course you've got to file your sales tax returns. So, the filing. Um, there's a number of, how that process works varies by location. Generally, how it works is you register with whatever state you're doing business with, and you need to file periodically to report how much sales tax you collected, and then you write a check for that amount to them.
Yeah. And
That
I want to
process does
clarify.
vary by location, though. So
Yeah. And when you're collecting sales tax, you're basically operating as a tax collector on behalf of the state, right? And taking money from people, but that's not yours. You have to then turn the money over to the state periodically, and that's often called remitting or remitting funds. And it varies by state and by the amount of revenue you have, whether you got to do it monthly or quarterly or whatever it is. Yeah.
yeah, based on when you do register, they'll give you the guidelines, but they'll tell you what that frequency is. And most states, the more volume you're doing, the more quickly they want their money. And so if you're doing, 5 grand a year, you probably can just report that sales tax once a year and you're fine. Whereas if you're doing millions of dollars a year, they're going to want that constantly. So
Hmm.
you have to find out the filing frequency based on how much business you're doing. And as that increases, you need to keep an eye on that as well. A lot of states also require you to fill out what's called a zero return. And what that means is even if you didn't earn money, you're still responsible for filling out that return, and even if it says nothing,
Right.
you're a lot of
They're like,
crap.
I swear I didn't collect any
Yeah.
sales tax. Okay. That's funny.
And then if you've got to keep track of any exemptions as well. So if you're dealing with tax exempt organizations, a lot of times you'll still need to report that you earned this revenue, but you also can report that, that was not taxable. And so it's your responsibility to collect that information. If they need a tax certificate, a proof of that, you need to be able to provide that on demand as well. And then at the end of whatever that period is, annually, quarterly, most commonly, you've got to file and remit that. And typically that's going to just involve going to the website, filling out some papers or a form or something like that, and sending that in. And so let's take a quick look at sales tax in Check Cherry. So where do you find this information? Um, Go to, so my screen's probably a little bit small, huh, Judd? Let me just share this window here. Okay, so
And as you're doing that, I just want to remind people, chat with us anytime you have questions about Chick Cherry's features, anything like that. Also, if you have feedback, um, keep in mind we can't really advise you on tax exactly, but we do want people to understand what Chick Cherry does and kind of our understanding of the lay of the land for our customers. We think it'll be helpful.
awesome. So first off, let's just take a quick look at how you even start collecting sales tax. If this is the first year you're collecting sales tax, you've got to turn that on and start tracking it. So to first turn it on, you're going to go to Manage, Business Settings, and then Tax. And if you're just coming to this page for the first time, it's going to say something like you have not enabled sales tax collection on your account. Click here to set up. And so we'll click that. And it's going to have us give some kind of a name. Doesn't really matter. If you're doing different tax settings in different states, you could call this something like Nevada tax, Arizona tax, things like that. But we're just going to leave it as default for now. And then we're going to leave this option here that says automatically calculate sales tax rate based on venue location. And what that'll do for you is whenever we're able to collect the venue from the customer, so whether that's like booking or when you're sending them a proposal, things like that, once they enter the address, we'll call out to TaxJar, who has tax rates for all the different locations across the country, and they'll look up the tax rate for that location. And keep in mind the, tax rates can vary literally across the street. They can have, different tax rates if you happen to fall in a different, district
Yeah,
or
and
something.
some examples of that is if you're in a special entertainment district, right, where there's wedding venues or whatever it is, and it requires more police force, that type of thing. Sometimes the tax rates will be more. They'll have higher local rates, that type of stuff. So if your accountant or financial professional suggests that you need to collect sales tax based on where you're servicing customers, the venue, this option is really good. And it makes it super easy. And he'll show you also in the reporting, but it just automatically pulls the tax rate for wherever you're setting up shop for that event. And we do it at no extra charge. So it's really an awesome feature.
And yeah, and then if you don't want to use that for any reason, I mean, you can also set up a flat rate. So if you just, in your state, you always need to do 7.75%, you're welcome to do that as well. But we find for most people, setting it to automatic works best. And then down here, you can limit it to certain states. So if I wanted to limit it to, these three states, again, that's not super common. Generally, people just leave it on for all states.
Yeah.
Once you do that, once you turn on, set up your first tax zone. Well, first off, you can, we recommend trying it out. If you just need to quickly look up a tax rate, or if you just want to make sure, it's doing what you're expecting, you can drop in an address there and look up the tax rate. But once you have a tax zone set up, then you're going to start to see throughout Check Cherry, anywhere there's pricing, there's also going to be a little taxable button. So, by default, that's going to be enabled for all of your packages and add-ons and things like that. But if you do have something that is not taxable, you can always turn that on a case-by-case basis. Similarly, if I go to an add-on, if for some reason this scrapbook thing is not taxable, I can just turn that off, and uh, that'll avoid charging sales tax on that. And as the customer goes through that booking process, as soon as we're able to collect that address, we'll start showing the tax rate for them. You can also see on an invoice, we'll show the tax rate, of course, at the bottom. And then we'll show for each line item whether it's taxable or not. So that little T indicates it's taxable. In this case, the subtotal is 850 and the taxable amount is 850. But you might see a different number there if certain items were not taxable. So just something to keep in mind. Um, Probably most useful though is before we do that, one other thing to look at. If you ever do need to recalculate your taxes, there's a few ways you can do that. When you edit the address, by default, there's going to be a recalculate tax button, so that'll look it up automatically. But if you ever need to just manually change something, you can do that as well. So if for some reason you just want to set that to non-taxable, you're welcome to do that, and the tax will be hidden. You can also find that under the booking settings. We'll have the tax rate there as well. So if I wanted to specifically set it to 10%, you can do that as well. And probably most useful for when you're ready to report your sales tax, you're going to want to go to Sales and Reporting and look for the sales tax report. And that's going to have all the numbers you need for reporting that. So, this year just started out. We don't have any taxable transactions yet. Let's go ahead and set this to 2024. And I'm going to set that to December 31st. And we're going to search and see what comes up here. And now I've got lots of different things listed, right? So looks like I've got some, tax for Beaufort County, wherever that is, and they're charging 7%. Harris County, 8.25%. A lot of different, we have a lot of different, just kind of sample locations.
Demo account, yeah.
Yeah. You can also, under the customize options, well, and the reason we break it up that way is generally when you're reporting sales tax, they're going to want to know, each county is going to want to know how much you generated for that county. So generally you kind of have to break it out separately.
I have the impression this is a quarterly thing for most of our customers. I could be
Yeah,
wrong with
quarterly
that.
or annually. Yeah, based on
Yeah.
the.
And so
And then of course you can come in and customize that. So if you don't need to group it by county or city, you can turn that off and get a more compact view and say, okay, these are all my payments. What's the total? That's how much I owe, and that's how much I need to report on my form. You can also do things like if need to know the corresponding sales amount. For instance, some states require you to show how much money that, for instance, on this one, there was a $459 payment, and of that, $40 was taxable. You can do that as well. So I would say most common, settings, you can also limit by brand if you have multiple brands, but most commonly you're just going to need to change the date, and you'll be all set. Um, Generally speaking, sales tax is due based on when you received payment. So with event companies, it's a little tricky, right? Because a lot of times you take a deposit up front and then you actually provide the services, potentially in a different year. Generally speaking, the payment date, if you just if all you took was the deposit, that's all the sales tax you would have to report at this time, unless your accountant tells you something differently. And then, of course, you can download that report as well. So if you need to send that to your accountant or, just for your records, definitely feel free to download that. That'll generate an Excel spreadsheet of that. I think that's about it.
well, we have a question here. Hold on. So first, Jody says, "Hey, she's calling from Seattle. Thanks for doing the class." So awesome, Jody. Thanks for coming. She says, "So the taxes are based on the data of payment and not the date of service." And
Generally speaking, yes. So there's two types of accounting, what's called cash accounting and accrual accounting. For most small businesses, cash accounting is going to be much simpler, and basically it means when you got the money in hand. That being said, like I said, there's always exceptions. If your accountant says no, you need to pay the full amount. They might know there might be different rules where you're located. But generally, it would be the portion that you've actually received based on that payment date, not based on the event date. And the way our tax report breaks it up, we do break it up so that it's only, if you have a 30% deposit, only 30% of that will be applied to the tax.
it's cash accounting, and accrual accounting is the other one. And cash accounting is basically, as I understand it, is, how much money comes in and goes out. It's pretty straightforward. Where accrual accounting does things that are a little bit more thoughtful when it comes to like the date the services are provided and, all that stuff. But like I say, I think the vast majority of our customers do cash-based accounting.
Awesome. Okay.
And Tim says, I know I received a 1099 from Stripe for all credit card payments, but do I receive anything official from Check Cherry that I need to file?
Uh,
Well,
we'll get into that one just a little bit. So that's a good seg into
hold on. He says based on tax collected. So Check Cherry
oh,
does not have an obligation to report to the government the taxes that you say you've collected. So we don't send anything. If you use check cherry payments for credit card transactions and actual money is moving around, we'll cover it later, but a 1099-K will be issued. But as far as in, it's not really check cherry's job to enforce, like, well, I mean, somebody could go in and delete events and payments for all we know. Do you know what I mean? It's not really something, yeah. So, and then Claude's got his hand up. So go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question if you'd like.
Hi, thanks for doing this. This is Claude speaking. Um, has anybody had a customer reach out with a resale certificate for sales tax? So what they're saying is that so it's not a nonprofit, it's not a church, it's not a school, right? So they are saying that because they're reselling my service, I'm not supposed to charge taxes because they're already charging their client. Is that common practice in this industry?
I
yeah,
can't
that's a good
speak as to
question.
the event. Sorry, Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think that's a great question. So in general, resale certificates, they kind of make a little more sense when you think of, say you've got a storefront and you buy something from Costco and then you resell it to the public. You would give Costco your reseller's permit. They wouldn't collect that sales tax, and then, but you would collect the sales tax when you sell the product. I'm not super familiar with services. I don't see it, ultimately it's up to them. If they have a reseller permit, it's on them whether, they're complying with the laws or not. So if they're able to provide you a certificate, you can use that as evidence that, they said they were non-taxable. You don't have, a way to, it's not really on you to verify that beyond them giving you the certificate. And so yeah, you would not charge them sales tax. And then if what they're doing is not right, that might that might be a problem for them down the
I,
road.
I think what I would recommend is reach out to the franchise tax board of your state and just tell them what's going on. But I think Matt's kind of right in that it's probably, they're probably going to say, yeah, if they're reselling, we're not going to charge tax twice, the same, kind of for the same trend, it's like double taxation effectively. Um, you're acting as basically, an agent or an employee or a contractor of theirs in many ways. And so there's no need to do the sales tax. Like I don't pay sales tax when I hire a contractor or something like that. But absolutely reach out to the franchise tax board and see what they say. And just kind of keep that, just cover your bases, is what I would say. Yeah.
So, awesome. So moving on to income tax, obviously that's your end of the year. You're filling out your 1040s, your 1040 EZs, your Schedule Cs. Maybe you have a tax professional, maybe you're using TurboTax, things like that. Your income taxes are, kind of separate from your sales tax. So, um, we're not able to get into, the nitty-gritty of filing returns or any of that, but kind of a bird's eye view of how to think of it and what types of questions, what type of information you're going to need, is something we can kind of do. Um, and in general, you're going to owe tax on all the revenue you collected during the year. So we'll zoom in here. Okay. Um, so you're going to owe tax on the revenue you collected during the year. And it's worth remembering, kind of emphasizing that it means collected during the year. So again, if you're doing cash accounting, if you collected a deposit this year for an event next year, you're only going to treat that money that you collected as income when you're filling out your taxes. Similarly, if you refunded money, that's a minus, that's a negative. And so
Mhm.
you can basically kind of look at how much money you collected this year versus how many, it doesn't really matter how much booking volume you generated or things like that. It's primarily, assuming you're doing cash accounting, which I think most should be, um, it's going to be how much money you collected. And the other thing to keep in mind or kind of emphasize is it does mean all revenue. So it doesn't matter, you're going to get different forms, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But, as far as for tax purposes,
Right.
they're looking for the total dollars you earned, regardless of any paperwork, anything you receive from anybody. They're expecting that you pay on all revenue, which doesn't mean everybody does, but that's the expectation. And if they catch you not doing that, you can get in trouble. And then kind of the next thing to keep in mind is, in general, most business expenses can be deducted. So you've got your income, minus your expenses. And there's a lot more that goes into it, but at a very, very high level, you owe tax on your income minus your expenses. Um,
And so,
some,
like,
yeah, go
Matt, if
ahead.
I can just chime in some common expenses like equipment and supplies, your check cherry subscription, right? Anything that you're using that's an expense related to the business, you can reduce your basically taxable income. And so, insurance, bank fees, accounting services, all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Training and development. Some people go to the Photo Booth Expo. That's a business expense. Um, Fly to Vegas, all that type of stuff. So there's a lot of different ways to reduce your taxable income. And again, I think a good accountant, if you're doing meaningful volume, will pay for themselves. And it's great to have somebody that's savvy and can help you maximize or minimize your tax obligations in a proper way.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, as Judd said, it's really an accountant can help a lot with this, but is ultimately determining what is deductible is complicated. There's a lot of, for instance, if I do an event and I hire Judd to help me out, maybe I make $1,000 and I pay him 500. I took home 500, so that's great. It's pretty straightforward. Similarly, if I had payment fees on that, payment processing fees or things like that, that would also be deductible. Where it gets a little more complicated are things like equipment. So if you've bought equipment, generally the IRS requires you to kind of spread that over several years,
Mhm.
um, and basically depreciate it over time. And so you might have spent, 5 grand on the photo booth, but you can only deduct, a third of that or a
The
fifth of
first
that or
year,
something each year for 5 years.
yeah. Meals and entertainment, right? That's a little different too.
Meals and
Uh,
entertainment, it's a percentage.
yeah.
So you can only deduct a percentage of it. So travel is another one that's interesting. With travel, it's generally there's a per mile allowance you can take. And so you kind of have to keep track of how many miles you drove, and that doesn't necessarily just mean to events. It can be to the bank or to,
Right.
all sorts of things. But you do need to keep track of that, and then you're able to take a per mile deduction as well. And so to me, that's where an accountant pays for themselves. If you've got a moderate-sized business, the amount of money that an accountant will save with different, knowing how all that works, they'll generally pay for themselves. So things like office deductions and when you can
Right.
take that and phones and internet, there's a lot of different things that somebody can do
Yep.
with. But, um, so yeah, so kind of going into what forms should you expect? So um, basically, the short answer is you're going to typically get a 1099-K from any payment providers. And if you're using Check Cherry Payments, you'll get a 1099-K from us. You'll also get one, if you're using Venmo, Stripe, Square, Zelle, things like that. You also may get a 1099-K from those as well. And that's only going to report the money received via that specific payment provider. So what that means, so if say you're using Check Cherry Payments and 2/3 of your payments are via credit card and the other third are from Venmo and check and cash and things like that that you're putting in manually, your 1099-K from Check Cherry is only going to report the money that basically went through Check Cherry Payments. All the other stuff, you know, will not be reflected on that paperwork. Um, you know, and so, and you may not even get one if depending on your volume. So over the years, the threshold has been decreasing. It last year, a lot of our customers didn't get them because the threshold was higher. This year, the threshold is $5,000. So if you did more than $5,000 in revenue with any of your payment processors, so Check Cherry, Stripe, Venmo, you'll likely get one of these. In 2025, that's going to decrease to 2,500. And in 2026, anything less than 600 will generate one of those.
And I would say the 600 limit to me is them really cracking down on the Venmo Zelle stuff. You know what I mean? Like, absolutely, they're going to be Cash App. I mean, all that. Like, I feel like you're going to get a lot more. There's going to be a lot more 1099-Ks issued. And my understanding that 1099 is helpful for the government because you're basically having the person that, recorded income that doesn't owe tax on it, report it to the government, right? And so they make basically requirements for people in the position of knowing that money changed hands to report to the government that, hey, Judd transferred $30,000 during 2025 via Zelle type stuff. And so, of course, they like that because then they could track down people who are avoiding taxes.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, as Judd mentions, it's worth emphasizing a 1099. There's a few different versions of it. That's not really for you. Really, it's for the government. It's how they can track you and track the flow of money. You've got to report, presumably you should be reporting at least what you received on that. It may even be a higher number than what your 1099s say.
Mhm.
Uh, and back on the subject of the thresholds, even if you're under $5,000, some states do have lower thresholds. And so you might get a 1099-K even if you're under $5,000 because your state requires it. So, um,
And I just want to say one of the tricks here is to just, in my opinion, do your taxes properly, right? Have good help, a professional, and pay your estimated taxes quarterly. Stay on top of it. Don't wait until the end of the year to do everything and kind of rush and scramble and all that stuff. If you kind of just make it part of business procedures that you do on a recurring basis, basically, and you'll be better off.
exactly. And your 1099s, whether they're from Check Cherry or other payment providers, they should arrive by January 31st. That's kind of the cutoff. So you should, obviously things can get delayed or whatever in the mail, but we'll have ours sent out and everybody else that is sending you one should have them sent to you, arriving by January 31st. And those can come electronically or they can be a physical paper. Depending on how you set that up when you got a notification. And again, just to kind of emphasize, you owe tax on all revenue. So, despite even if you don't get a 1099, they're still expecting you to report it. So, You also might get other 1099s from other organizations. So if you do business with somebody, even if they paid via credit card, it's possible they'll send you a 1099 as well. That won't be a 1099K, it'll be something else. And again, it's all just really it's a tool for the to track. It's ultimately you can generally just hand those to your accountant or tell fill out your TurboTax or whatever. But at the end of the day, that doesn't mean you need to double report that revenue or anything like that. If you get a 1099K from your payment processor and then a customer also 1099s you for a certain amount, it just basically it comes down to how much revenue you collected.
And
Whatever that.
I could see a corporate client that you do recurring business with, just having, just sending out 1099s to vendors and all that stuff. And they're just
Yeah,
covering their butts, type
yeah.
stuff.
So
Tim
don't
asked,
add
go
them
ahead.
up. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Tim asked, is there a way to generate 1099s for private contractors through Check Cherry? And so, Tim, I'm assuming you mean people who work for you to help facilitate the services you provide, and then you pay them, that type of thing. And the short answer is no, we don't have a feature around generating 1099s at the moment. I could absolutely see how that would be helpful, but it's not something we offer at the moment. Maybe at some point, it's something we could do. But we can show you some of the reporting that can show you basically kind of how much you paid people. And that would basically just be, I don't know, Matt's going to hop over right now, but basically that would, help you just fill out the form. It's pretty straightforward, quite frankly. Um, you're going to need some information on them, but yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
forms are really easy to fill out. The hard part is, you know, collecting the information from the from the employee.
Yeah.
Ideally, when they come on, you would have them fill out like a W-9 if you're doing 1099s, or set them up with your payroll provider if they're W-2s. But
Yeah. S.
uh,
Moore says TurboTax does it for you as well. So yeah, I mean it's something that's done. But yeah, I mean, don't we
the
have we have some reporting, right, for this type of thing where I don't
yeah,
know if our demo account has data or not, but
and like I said, the 1099s are really easy to fill out. I mean, basically, it just asks for a social security number and an amount. So looking real quick at, some reports you'll commonly need when preparing taxes, or that your accountant might ask you, or things like that. Um, there's kind of three that are really useful. So we've got our payment history report, which is going to have a list of all the payments within a date range. We've got our expense report. So if you do record your expenses in Check Cherry, uh, that's going to have a list of all of those. And then we've got a profit and loss that kind of has that all in one place, at least for the high level numbers. So I'm actually going to start with this because I think that's a real useful one to
and
look at
yeah,
here.
and to be clear, the profit and loss will take all the revenue that you collect in Check Cherry that you record, check payments, Zelle payments, card payments, whatever it is through the period, and then any expenses that you log in there and then give you net income. Yeah.
Exactly. And so with our demo account here, I've got it set to 2024. You can edit that range,
I
change,
like our profit margins over here, Matt.
right? Yeah. And typically your income, we don't break it down very deep, but you're just going to have your income, sales. In this case, we've got 58K in sales, and then your expenses. So those will be broken out by category. And then it's going to have your net income. Under the filter, we do have a view that has a little bit more information. Um,
This
and
is
so
new.
this is new. And so if you want to break it out a little bit further, for instance, for our staff payments, if you want to see, okay, well, who did I actually pay? That view is helpful. And so that'll break it out by Maraschino made 300, Alice Cedar had 250. And then you can see everything all in one place. You can, of course, click those and get the more
Verify.
details.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
uh,
Tim, I mean, basically right there, I mean, there's your 1099 amounts. Obviously, Check Cherry's not facilitating collecting Social Security numbers and other things. But that would be a good starting place, basically. Yeah.
And then and so you notice these categories here: job supplies, staff payments, uncategorized. That's going to correspond to when you're setting up expenses. Obviously, as you're creating an expense, you can give it a category, and that is real useful at the end of the year when you need to figure out, okay, well, I can't deduct all of my meals and entertainment, so having it classified separately is helpful because now you can break that out, and just deduct the proportion that you're allowed to. So
Uh,
looking at the categories here,
One
uh,
second here,
yeah.
Matt. Joe's got a question. Is there a way to book expos and track those expenses as well? Those don't have income. And so, Jody, if I'm understanding, maybe what I think what you're saying is if I do a free event, is that what you're saying? Yes. Okay. Yeah, and it's my understanding when you do a free event, there isn't an expense, I guess, related to
Well,
it. But I could be wrong. I guess if you're hiring somebody, right? If you pay staff. How does that work? I'm not quite sure, to be honest. Matt, do you have any thoughts on that?
yeah. Um, so the way Check Cherry thinks of it, bookings and expenses, income is your bookings basically. So whether you made $1,000 or $0, it kind of, it doesn't matter. And then your expenses are going to be, logged separately. You can tie an expense to a booking if you want, but you don't need to. So for instance, if you go to a wedding show and you paid a certain amount of money for that, or did a
Let's
free event
say,
for somebody. Yeah, go ahead.
Jody, do you hire somebody to go to the expo? And I think you could basically put in expenses in there, but I
Yeah,
don't, I
anything
don't,
expenses. Yeah,
I don't think you can say like, hey, I'm going to deduct the cost of the event. It doesn't work that way, right? So if you were to say, let's say this would normally cost somebody $1,000. I'm going to do it for free. Therefore, my expense is $1,000. I don't believe that's proper logic when it comes to the tax stuff. But you might be able to deduct like things like the mileage to the booking, or if you hired staff or something like that, and the booking would have kind of a zero revenue and negative and expenses, is my guess. Talk.
Okay, so I unmuted myself because I figured it would just
Cool.
be easier.
yeah,
But
Yeah.
hi everybody, I absolutely love Check Cherry, so this is
Thank
great.
you.
So I have an expo coming up February 1st and 2nd. The expo costs so much money to book, and then I'm creating a backdrop, and I've got all these small expenses. I'm going to pay some staff to be there with me. So I just wasn't sure if there was a way to put that in instead of a booking and having it be a $0 booking. I just didn't know if there was a way to track that or how I should track it in Check Cherry.
yeah.
If-
So all of those would be expenses. So if you go to sales expense, basically you would log that. So you would say, okay, um, I'm paying this person X dollars, $500, and so that's where you would kind of record your expenses. Anything
and
that's
no
in the
revenue, right? So you're negative $500 on the booking. But it's not like, again, you can't like, oh, hey, this would normally cost some people, I guess I've seen people do free events and they want to have it be, but you could log that as a booking if you wanted, but you don't need to log that as a booking.
So I'm
You can
just
log the
logging it as an
expenses.
expense. Okay.
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and
Because I
even
do
if
have, I have done free events before, and I have a fundraiser coming up where I'm going to, if there's a balance owed, I'll write that off. But I was just going to put that in as a
Yeah.
credit.
Yeah. Yeah. And so basically how it works is, you could, with the free event, you could pay your staff, that would be deductible, but any, your own time, your own labor, things like that would not be. So,
Yep. And S Moore said I would book it as normal, then do a 100% discount and then add any expenses. And I think that's, yeah.
Got it. Okay, I will do that. Thank you. I'm new. This is my first year, so this is really
It's a
helpful.
great question, Jody. I mean, thanks for joining. Thanks for the support and the kind words. Tim says I have done free events and I get a letter from the organization for donation amount. Is that in the donation amount is a write-off? So yeah, cool. I mean, I think, talk to your accountant or professional about this stuff.
I mean,
This
yeah.
is not our wheelhouse, quite frankly. We have to deal with this because we have to support you guys. And so we do
At
see
the end
some
of the
stuff.
day, though, basically it comes down to income minus expenses. And so whether you do a free event for a nonprofit or Apple or, any other company, whether they're nonprofit or anything else, if you make money, that counts as income. If you don't, you know, you
There's
didn't
no
bring in
income.
income, and any expenses that you had would be deductible. And I think sometimes nonprofits kind of take advantage of people a little bit because they imply there's a bit more advantage than there really is. You could show up to my house and do a free event, and you would also make $0, and you could still deduct any expenses you had. So generally speaking, there's not really an advantage to that, but
Yeah.
of course, ask your accountant.
Yep.
And so with all of these expenses, I think we kind of chatted, it'd be nice to just kind of look at some things that people do that are common expenses. So obviously any advertising and marketing, that can be things like Facebook ads, maybe you advertise with the chamber, things like that. Automobile expenses, generally that's just going to be travel. Some people do other things, maybe if you have a trailer you buy or things like that, maybe there's something there. Bank fees, of course. So if your Bank of America account charges you $15 a year or a month or whatever it is, that would be dues and subscriptions. And that can include like software subscriptions or memberships to
Your
different.
Check Cherry subscription is a tax deduction. I mean, I love that. No.
Exactly. Any equipment you buy, and generally that's going to be depreciated over a few years. Insurance, paper, other job supplies, legal professional fees. So your accountant that you hire to help deal with all this, that would be deductible as well. Licenses, business licenses, permits. If you need to get something repaired, that'll count. Again, marketing, meals and entertainment, uh, rent or lease. If you have a warehouse that you keep your stuff in, that's typically deductible. Um, and staff, obviously, and then certain,
And
taxes.
I think the travel is a huge one. Even if you don't charge travel fees, there's still a tax deduction there. So deductions aren't just, you can't deduct everything that leaves your checking account, your bank account, and there's more deductions than that might not even ever touch your banking account.
Mhm. And as a business owner, I mean, you do pay a lot of taxes, but there are a lot of ways you can bring that income down.
Hmm.
Uh, just it turns out there's a lot of things that that you use or that are partially related to the business or things like that. And so there's
But think
definitely.
about it, Matt, you and I don't get a chance to travel much for business at all. I mean, we do software, but and our customers, they're traveling all over.
Yeah, if you can find an event to do and somewhere you're traveling, I don't think you can deduct the whole thing, but maybe there's a good argument for at least a portion of that. So um and so let's see, let's go back to our reports here. And so that's our profit and loss. Similarly, you can get just kind of a more detailed, grid type of list of those expenses as well. So if I just want to see all my expenses, download that to Excel or another spreadsheet, you can do that. And then lots of different columns and, attachment or different columns and things like that you can customize it with as well. You can filter based on all types of things as well too. So expense report, real useful this time of year. And then payment history report, useful as well if you do want to break things out a little bit more. Uh, and again, under filter, we have lots of options for kind of narrowing it down. If you just want to see your credit card payments for some reason, or PayPal, or things like that, that can be useful. You can also change the columns. So if you're using Cherry payments, we know the processing fees on those transactions. And so that's a great column to enable to, if your accountant or something wants to see that, you can see all the processing fees and what that came to make sure you deduct that. Um,
Jody
things.
has a question. Does every expense have to be assigned to a booking? And The short answer is no, because there are expenses that our customers have that are not related to bookings. For example, your Check Cherry subscription, website hosting, legal fees, accounting fees, that type of thing. So nope.
Yeah. And so with that payment history again, that's going to have all the details of every payment that you received and how you received it. So so if your accountant does want that very detailed breakdown of everything, that payment history report is going to be a really useful one. And then one last report that's real helpful at the end of the year as well. So under the booking details report, the payment is kind of based on when the payment happens, and your booking report is going to be based on when the booking happens. So if we review that one, that's going to have all kinds of information about your bookings, and it's useful for lots of things. But one thing it's real useful for is calculating your travel distance. So there is a billable distance and a total distance in that. And so the billable, if you're doing things like first 20 miles free or something like that, that's kind of what the difference is. Total will include the total miles. Billable is just how many they were billed for. Um, and once you turn that on, you can see how many miles, driving miles were between each location. Theoretically, if you're really going to do it properly, you are supposed to have a log where you log your starting location, your ending location, and all that. But practically speaking, this just knowing those numbers is enough for most people to report that
Yeah.
information.
And Matt, if let's say somebody wants to give their accountant access to Check Cherry during the tax season,
Mhm.
what should they do?
Couple options. You can always just download the reports, of course, and send that to them. That'll be a spreadsheet. Then they don't need to figure out how to do anything. So that is one option. But you can also create them an account as well. So under Manage User Accounts, you can add a new user. And since the accountant is going to see all of your numbers, that's kind of why they're there. You would give them an admin account so that they have access to all of the numbers.
Cal, yep. Cal asks, can we have the distance in kilometers? So back to the
Yes.
reporting we were just saying.
So when you set up, so under Manage Business Settings, we kind of talked about the tax setting earlier. Travel is something you want to take a look at too. So travel is where you're going to set up your travel zones. And that's of course useful for, saying, hey, I'm going to charge $1 a mile, etc. But what you can also do with that is just set up a free travel zone. And the reason being, we don't require an address when you sign up for Check Cherry, so we don't necessarily know where you're coming from. But by creating a travel zone, that makes it so that we can calculate the travel
Yeah,
distance.
where it's at. No, he asked about can we get the distance in kilometers? In the
Yeah. And so
so
what
this
when
was
you're setting
mileage.
So when you're setting that travel zone up, you can set your preference, whether you want it kilometers or miles. And so that's how we're going to calculate it based on that travel zone. So if you've got a free travel, no limit, no fees, etc., what that's going to do is that's going to calculate travel on all of your bookings. And if you set it to kilometers, then the report will reflect that as well. If you've been collecting it in miles, we don't necessarily have that data because we've
Convert it.
been, yeah,
You could export it to Excel, easy enough, I
yeah.
suppose. Do some math. But as always, chat with us if you need help on something. We can help you.
Mhm. And so let's see, payment history, expense, P&L. And so, yeah, so I think those are the main reports to look at, at the end of the year. If you find yourself coming back to certain reports as well, you can also save those. So when you save a report, you give it a name, and then it's going to show up under your saved reports. So if you find yourself constantly coming back to the travel report and don't want to have to, turn on those columns, it's definitely worth saving it as a saved report with just the information customized for you as well.
Well, we got about 8 minutes left. You want to do a Q&A? Maybe people have some more
Uh,
questions.
Take a quick look at
Um,
our spreadsheet or at our Zoom.
Yes.
Hey, Cynthia, how are you?
Hey, fine. Was he going to say something first?
let's see.
Yeah. So the only other things we were going to mention, payments to independent contractors. So that is something to keep in mind. Just kind of want to call that out. So if you have independent contractors, staff helping you out with events, if you did more than $600 with them, you are supposed to send them a 1099 NEC. So that's something to look at. And real easy to fill out. It's just, but you do need their social security number. And that is also due January 31st. So now's the time to get on that so that you can get that sent out to them. And then we kind of talked about the donated services, but that was something I wanted to make sure we covered. And basically, it all kind of boils down to your income minus your expenses. So regardless of when you earned, whatever money you received minus whatever expenses you have, that's kind of how it's going to basically end up. So with that, I think that's all I had. So.
Cynthia, it's you. Go ahead.
Hey, sorry I came in late, but I wanted to find out, because I have not logged anything into Check Cherry when this was implemented, because I was still using another program. So, and you may have already said it, so I don't know, but I think you said an email or something's going to come to us, a 1099 from Check Cherry. And if that is the case, then I just give it to my accountant like I've always done with other things. And because this already have all of my expenses and things in there, so
Yep.
I didn't want to have to double,
Yeah.
inputting things in Check Cherry when it's already in somewhere else.
Yeah.
So
So
how does that work? I'll get something from you guys.
If you're using Check Cherry payments for the payment processing, then anything that went through that, you'll get a 1099-K form for, and so you'll give that to your accountant. You'll also get one for, if you have like Venmo enabled, if you don't use Check Cherry payments, if you use Square or something like that,
No,
you
I,
might,
I strictly use
okay,
Check Cherry.
yeah, then you would get, you might get multiple 1099s, and those are all due by January 31st. So generally you just kind of want to wait until after that to get everything you're going to get and then give that to your accountant.
Okay.
And yeah.
One last question, and don't bite my head off for those that are in here, but I still use, depends on who it is, because some attendants, they get paid under the table, if y'all know what I mean. But I did tell them I'm gonna have to change things, I know, because Cash App has changed things.
Yep.
So for those people that I have in the past been paying through Cash App, I'll still write it off as an expense when I do my other things. But now with the 1099-K coming in through Cash App, you were saying that I need to give them a 1099 NEC?
So yeah, so you might get a report, if people are paying you via Cash App, then they might send you something saying how much
No, I'm
they
paying them.
Okay, but if you're sending out money, if you paid them over $600, then
Right.
you're supposed to send them a 1099 NEC reporting that income. And that basically that with the 1099s, basically it's kind of reporting to the government. I mean, it's so they can kind of track the
You're
money.
kind
So
of
if they
like
Yeah.
pay you
the
a
sender of
bunch of
money, yeah, is tattling on the person receiving money that, hey, I actually did send this money.
Right. And that was the whole purpose
Yeah,
of them wanting
that's
me to
why
do
that
it
is. Yeah.
through Cash App so they can try to keep some of that money. But
Yeah.
now that Cash App is doing the 1099-K,
They'll get one from Cash App if you're sending them over, I guess this year, what'd you say it was $2,500? This year they'll get it if it's over, no,
So, uh, so what I read, well, no, you're right. Over $2,500 is when they'll get
in
a
2024
cash.
or whatever in 2020, maybe it's 2025. I
okay,
don't know.
so over 2,500 in
You can look
2024.
it up. I mean, please don't
Yeah.
take everything we say as tax
No, no,
advice.
no, no,
We're
I'm
not
not.
experts.
Yeah.
I just hate I came
Um,
in late. But
yeah.
so they're gonna get something from Cash App, or am I
If they're
sending?
over the threshold, Cash App will send them something, and you could
Oh,
look up
okay.
1099 thresholds for 2024, and kind of see what they have. But
But my
Okay.
understanding is you're still
When I had been
supposed to
doing my
send.
taxes, I'm sorry.
But my understanding is you're still, even if they're going to get something from Cash App, my understanding is you're still supposed to send them a 1099. And that's basically so, if the government ever audits you and says, hey, did you really spend this money? This is kind of your like evidence, like, yep, I reported it.
Okay,
And
that makes
yeah,
sense.
that's kind of to
Because,
protect you. Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense because I always put it on my taxes as an expense. So
Yeah.
I guess you're right. So they can say, hey, was this really an expense or did you just give them some money? I get it. Okay. And that's where the 1099
And if,
NEC goes in expense.
Mhm.
yeah, and I just did a quick Google search. It looks like 2024, the threshold is $5,000. So if you've paid
Oh,
some $5,000 via Cash App, they'll get one from Cash App. But regardless, you should be sending one if you pay over $600. That's
uh-huh.
your responsibility. So S. Moore says, does the booking or utilization report show individual items, packages? For example, I may rent a bounce house and a slide. Next time I rent a bounce house and a bounce house with a slide. Next time I rent a bounce house and a water slide. I need to see the number of times and income from only the bounce houses. Bounce houses equal 100. The report would say bounce houses rented 3 times, total income $300. So there's a
So
lot there. I don't, let's see what we got.
yeah, so a couple things we got here. You may want to check out the most frequently booked report. That will have a breakdown of revenue by package. So for instance, we've got a 4-hour package, a 3-hour silver, and that will show how much each of those packages generated. And you can customize that by date range and things like that. That's probably going to be the easiest way to see that data. If not, maybe in the bookings report you can do that as well. So if you want to filter by things like package, you know, 3-hour package, stuff like that, that will let you do that as well. So that's probably your best bet. If you do need help, maybe maybe chat with us and we can help as well too. So
And Jody has one, or I guess Alex has something. Go for it,
Alex has
Alex.
yeah.
Is there going to be a way in the future for expenses? I just kind of get a general idea, not for tax purposes, but for my own, records, how much I'm paying employees, so that way I can see my profit on that. Are we ever going to have a point where we can, kind of with packages, when we assign an employee? I have some employees that are flat rates, so that way when we assign it to them, flat rate expense, or have employees that are paid by the hour, where we can put their rate of what they pay, what we pay them, and then it goes off the hours of the package to get an idea. So that way it's automatic. Because I mean, I do probably close to about 200 events a year and 3 or 4 different employees on each one. So like doing it manually every time, it's just so much that
A lot of
it
work,
would
right?
be cool if it would be like automated or some way that we can integrate this with like an API or Zapier or something like that. So that way it's automated. So at the end of the year, I can go, okay, yeah, I have this huge number of what my profit is, but then when I look at expenses, go, man, my payroll was really high on this, but these packages have a higher price point, and I can see like what the package is for, and then also how much I'm paying in overhead to make better business decisions. Thank
Right.
you, guys.
I think it'd be cool if we offered some payroll features at some point in the future. It's more complicated, I think, than one would imagine on the surface. Somebody else mentioned the idea of like 1099s being sent through Check Cherry, all that stuff. So we don't know exactly how that looks in terms of if we roll that our own or integrate with somebody or whatever that looks like. Totally get it when it comes to doing 200 events and 3 people and calculated and all the data is in check cherry. A lot of the data is in check cherry, and we could make your life easier. So it's great feedback. I think it'd be awesome. I don't know, Matt, you want to add anything?
No, I think that's yeah, I think you're right. Like I think it totally, fits within the scope of Check Cherry and making that even. The biggest problem we've I think had with is just kind of there is a lot of variation in how people pay and like different rates for different packages, or if this package they do one thing and with an add-on something else
Yeah.
happens. So just kind of figuring out how to do that in a way that's not insanely complicated is kind of the goal. But yeah, I would love to
And, Alex says, I mean, one of our challenges is prioritizing kind of what to work on next and all that stuff and the balance.
so that's a good segue, Judd. So
Yeah.
what's what does somebody want to do if
Yeah. So, and one of the ways that is most helpful in prioritizing what we do this year or each year is our annual survey. And so just put up a banner inside the app. You'll see there with the green button, just take the survey. It's short, only takes a few minutes. We've modified the first question. We used to ask like, what's the one thing that we can do to make your life better? But now we say, go ahead and give us your list and rank them on a scale of 1 to 10. It's really helpful for us to see when a lot of people want something similar, it's a good signal to kind of prioritize in that area and kind of really dive in and invest our resources on that side. So please take the survey, everyone. We'll also send out an email. We love your feedback and we appreciate your support. And Jody, I'll get to you on chat, I suppose, with this question here. But because we're at 7:03, I think we'll sign off here. But please take that survey and let us know. We want to know kind of about your challenges and how we can help you guys. I mean, that's the more we can understand that and do a better job, the more value we provide. It just makes our business stronger. So we really appreciate the feedback. Thanks for coming to the webinar. And Matt, great job. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for doing the slides. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, Cynthia. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for coming. Bye, Joe.